that has been taken. In a historic decision, the cabinet has given its nod to One Nation, One Election. They have essentially accepted the proposal of the Kovind committee. Former President Kovind was heading a high-level committee on the feasibility of One Nation, One Poll. This report has now been accepted. Now, why is this important? One Nation, One Poll for long has been a contentious issue. It's a promise of the BJP and the ruling party. And the reason that they want to bring in simultaneous polls or One Nation, One Poll is that they say it would ease the burden on the exchequer. After all, having the country in constant election mode costs money. It also ensures that governments and parties are more focused on wooing voters rather than governance and doing their job. That's at least the argument for simultaneous polls. What does it essentially mean? It means that elections for the central government, the state government, and eventually even for local bodies will all take place at the same time. Is this even possible? What are the kind of constitutional amendments that are required to do it? Why is the primary opposition party against it? And what does that mean for us as citizens? Those are some of the things that we're going to look at over the next half hour in this special show. But before we move forward, let's first listen in to what Union Minister Ashwini Vaishnav said at the cabinet briefing while announcing that the committee report on One Nation, One Poll has been accepted.
पार्लियामेंट्री कमेटी ने भी 2015 में अपनी 79th रिपोर्ट में कहा था गवर्नमेंट को कि सजेस्ट मेथड्स फॉर साइमल्टेनियस इलेक्शंस इन 2 phases. इसीलिए हाई लेवल कमेटी गठित की गई थी अंडर द चेयरमैनशिप ऑफ श्री रामनाथ कोविंद जी, द फॉर्मर प्रेसिडेंट ऑफ इंडिया, एंड दैट कमेटी एक्सटेंसिवली कंसल्टेड अ ब्रॉड स्पेक्ट्रम ऑफ स्टेक होल्डर्स including political parties, judges, constitutional experts, large number of experts from various fields. इन सब के extensive consultation के बाद में एक रिपोर्ट सबमिट की थी. वो रिपोर्ट आपको ऑनलाइन अवेलेबल है. ये वेबसाइट आपके सामने रखा हुआ है और आप यहाँ से ऑफिशियल वेबसाइट से डाउनलोड करना. साइबर सिक्योरिटी इज मोर इम्पोर्टेंट, राइट? सो एक्सटेंसिव फीडबैक से आया था कि देयर इज अ वाइड स्प्रेड सपोर्ट फॉर साइमल्टेनियस इलेक्शंस इन द कंट्री. देयर इज अ वाइड स्प्रेड सपोर्ट फॉर साइमल्टेनियस इलेक्शंस इन द कंट्री. इसीलिए एनडीए सरकार की कैबिनेट ने आज सर्वसम्मति से इन रिकमेंडेशंस को एक्सेप्ट किया और इसका इम्प्लीमेंटेशन 2 phases में होगा जैसा कि कमेटी के रिकमेंडेशंस में है. फर्स्ट फेज में लोकसभा और असेंबलीज के इलेक्शंस को साइमल्टेनियस कराने का प्रयास होगा और उसके सेकंड फेज में लोकल बॉडी इलेक्शन से जो है ग्राम पंचायत, जिला पंचायत, ब्लॉक में पंचायत समिति और जितने भी अर्बन लोकल बॉडीज हैं, चाहे म्यूनिसिपैलिटीज हो, चाहे म्यूनिसिपल कमिटीज हो, चाहे म्यूनिसिपल कॉरपोरेशन हो, उन सब के लोकल बॉडी इलेक्शंस को विद इन 100 days ऑफ जनरल इलेक्शंस में करवाना, जिससे कि एक बार में सारे इलेक्शन का प्रोसेस कंप्लीट हो और फिर 5 साल तक सबके सब मेहनत करके देश के निर्माण में लगे.
Now remember, this is something that has been going on since a while. The bid or the argument for a One Nation, One Poll. And it's not going to be easy. For one, the 1951 Representation of People Act will be amended. The government will need a 2/3 majority in Parliament to actually pass the bill. The proposal must be passed by 50% of states. 5 more articles of the Constitution will have to be amended as well. So you have a lot of changes which will come. One of the big questions which also comes in, of course, is if you have a start date for One Nation, One Poll, for example, if it's 2029, what happens to states which have not completed their 5-year term? Because remember, it's a fresh start. So what happens in that case? Will there be legal challenges? What about the rights of those voters? So much to unpack. Let me start by speaking with Sajjan Kumar and Tejas Mehta, both political analysts who are joining us on the show. Welcome to both of you, and great to have you on NDTV Profit. Tejas, hi. Let me start with your view. I mean, just in terms of moving front foot on One Nation, One Poll, very clear messaging there. from the BJP? And of course, then it comes down to brass tacks and how they will actually implement it.
I think I'm completely all for the idea behind this, because I personally feel the benefits far outweigh all the apprehensions that possibly not just the opposition but many others who are apolitical personalities in this nation who also have, that they want to have a system where democracy, the principles of democracy are continued, and also we have a free and fair election. I think we all do know about the positives. We save a lot of money, we save a lot of time, we save a lot of, officers not being, posted in different parts of the country right through the 5 years. And of course, we don't have political tamasha every now and then whenever elections take place. But there also are apprehensions, and one of them, of course, has been that this could really overshadow political issues which are local and are more important in state elections. And when you have a Lok Sabha and state assembly elections together, the assembly elections could get completely disappear, especially when you have a towering personality like Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Though I do think this has not really been proved right. We have seen, for example, in Odisha, where at the same time simultaneous election took place in this year itself. The BJP did well, in both state and Lok Sabha elections, but they did better than what they expected in the assembly elections, where they now have a government too. In the past, we have seen completely opposite happen, where the Biju Patnaik government, the Naveen Patnaik government really swept the elections the last time. So I think the voter now is well aware that the Lok Sabha election and the state assembly election is different. There are different issues, different personalities at play, and therefore they think and vote differently. There could be, of course, a minority, a small percentage who could be overwhelmed by a national election which could take place, but that's life, that happens. I think in essence the Indian voter in that sense has matured. The second issue which really is brought up by the opposition is that this is not democracy. Now I really question that, because what do you connect democracy with? Is it simply repeated elections? Is that a sign of having democracy? We have elections so that we can be governed, we can be ruled by a certain set of people. Whichever party wins, that party goes ahead and rules us. That is what is the objective of democracy. It is not to have repeated elections where you weigh down and you literally tire people.
You've laid down, Tejas, you've laid down the argument for the question. Okay, so there are two parts. One is whether it's a good idea or not to really uphold the rights of Indian voters. The second is how will you actually do it? So let me come to Sajjan Kumar on this question. What is your view, Sajjan, in terms of whether it really works to the right of voters? I mean, the counter argument could be that if you have more and more elections, your netas are always answerable. They don't have a 5-year hiatus, a 5-year vacation period between elections where they don't have to listen to you, because if not in one election, they'll have to answer in the next one.
Yeah, precisely, but that's a very romanticized version to justify and rationalize the politics of parochialism, wherein multiple elections in different regions, suiting different political parties and multiple leadership, that sorts. But let's take the frame. One nation, one election is about the concurrent election, which was true about India until the fourth Lok Sabha election, that is 1967. Thereafter, ideally, the fifth general election should have happened in 1972. But given the political incentive that Ms. Indira Gandhi had, she preponed the fifth Lok Sabha election by 1 year. And thereafter, 86% of the elections, which used to be simultaneous, that is, assembly elections used to be along with the Lok Sabha election, got decentered. And thereafter, it was an artificial decentering of the assembly and the Lok Sabha election. It is not a natural culmination. This is one. Two,
having said that, Sajjan, the reason it also happened is, the reason you then broke away from simultaneous elections is because governments kept falling. Then you had new cycles for state governments, and that's not going to change. Are you saying with simultaneous polls that's going to change?
It's going to change. Let's take the debate that election should happen simultaneously weighs in favor that our public policy, which should be transformative, our leadership and the government, which should invest in another 5 years on governance, they make the very public policy ad hocish, keeping the next election cycle in mind. And in India is an election-bound state.
I understand that. I understand that, Sajjan, but that's not what I'm asking. I understand that, but that's not what I'm asking. I'm saying that is it feasible to have simultaneous elections if you have state governments that keep falling? Tejas, I'll come to you on this. Are you saying that we are going to stop seeing party hopping, breakaway governments?
No.
Okay, one second. Let me just get Tejas's view and then I'll come to you. Yes, Tejas.
Well, just to answer your question on what happens if a government falls during this thing, I think, in fact, when the report came out a few months back, I had gone through the entire report, and what the former president had suggested and his team is that if it's fallen in the first year, you choose either another, what generally always happens, the opposition or somebody led by some other party, you have another formation which comes up, they claim stake, and they will continue up to the next elections with Lok Sabha elections which take place. It could be 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, whatever it is, but it is only until the next cycle. Yes, this changes this 5 years thing, but that happened, for example, in Maharashtra just now, where we have had 3 to 4 governments in the last 5 years. So, I mean, it's happening in any case. So now what they are trying to do is try and ensure that we don't have repeated elections, and therefore...
But Tejas, that is so 1 minute. Doesn't the committee report suggest that if you have a hung assembly, you have a re-election? Or if you have a breakaway faction, no confidence motion, whatever it may be, you have a re-election. Doesn't that defeat the purpose of reducing the burden on the exchequer? Then you're just having more and more elections which are as expensive. I'm just trying to understand how feasible this is in view of what current Indian political reality is. Of course, theoretically, you should spend less money. Voters shouldn't have to go out again and again. Government policy should not be about wooing voters depending on the election cycle. But I'm talking about practical implementation, Tejas.
Well, there are two things here. One is about saving money, and the other is about ensuring that the 5 years which are given to any government are spent in governance and not in the political hue and cry and constant shouting that we have currently in the current system. Now, if the other is served when it comes to money, and in the hypothetical situation there is a hung parliament and there are no other formations really possible, and fresh elections is the only way out, so be it. That's the price you pay to ensure that a new government is formed. But the question is, how often does that really happen now? I mean, it doesn't really happen. You have some form of formation coming because actually nobody wants to have another election. So this scenario of a fresh election, just let's think of it when it did last happen. I think perhaps in Delhi when you had Arvind Kejriwal, resign. I can't remember it happening repeatedly in the last decade or so also. So I think these are scenarios we'll have to take care of.
Maharashtra, please let's look at Maharashtra. Every
state
have
fresh elections.
No, so that's what I'm saying.
Governments are coming, not fresh elections.
But in this case, if you have simultaneous polls, you will have to hold fresh elections. What will you do for the remainder of the term? Sajjan Kumar, that's my question, right? It's you back to square one, isn't it? Because the nature of Indian politics is not going to change overnight, right? Where everyone starts behaving themselves.
See, we have to quantify it. We have to quantify the frequency because there would be less incentive for the politicians and the political parties to go for a midterm poll. Because once suppose the 3.5 year of party has completed, and suppose you bring no confidence motion, whatever be the case, party hopping, defection, etc. But then also the election when it's going to be for another remainder of 1.5 year or 2 years, certainly it will act as a disincentive. So yes, there will be some sort of a remnant of decentered elections, non-simultaneous election, but nevertheless, you see, the larger incentive slowly would be to complete the tenure. I remember during the 1990s when there were an era of coalition and the debate was there were also some sort of a plugging in suggestions like you bring the no confidence motion only when you also simultaneously bring the confidence motion, So that way, what I'm saying, there are many reformative suggestions, but overall, even if some sort of the remnants will be there, the larger incentive will be there to complete the term. But mind it, more important is this system worked until 1971, until the fourth Lok Sabha election.
Reality is very different from 1961. That's my only submission. You
New
don't
generation,
have the dominance of only one party in that sense. Yes, politically you have, but regional parties have come to the fore, and their concern is, I'm playing devil's advocate because both of you are agreeing with each other. Let me come to Tejas here. One minute, Tejas. The concern because you have some parties which are opposing this. They're saying, first of all, this will benefit the larger central pan-India parties. Regional parties will suffer, issues will get muddled up between center and state. Now, you have some examples of simultaneous polls in a few states. Andhra is one of them. You have it in Odisha, and we spoke briefly about Odisha. But on a larger level, if you take this to states like Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, where very often the whole tone and tenor in a state election and a central election are very, very different. What happens then?
Well, our politicians are the most innovative and creative personalities we have here. I mean, they use 3D holograms. They present themselves everywhere. They offer from freebies to everything, reveries, whatever you call them, welfare. I mean, certainly they can find a better way to communicate to the people and ensure that the message is clear when it comes to the state elections. The message is clear when it comes to the national elections. And remember, even in this election, they were successful. For example, in UP, where they managed to create this whole thing about the reservation, about Okay,
1 minute. I just want to get a view. We have former Chief Election Commissioner S.Y. Qureshi with us, joining in on the show. Dr. Qureshi, thank you so much for speaking with us here at NDTV Profit. Absolute pleasure to have you on. And, I want to come to you more than the politics of it. And if you can just show Mr. Qureshi, I want to come to you on essentially the question of how we will implement this. Imagine the scale and size. Even our general elections is something which is record-breaking, the scale at which it happens. If you have to add state polls with it, and initially, of course, the suggestion is you have local body polls 100 days later, but if you have to at some point have all elections together, let's first talk about feasibility.
जी, आपने जो बात की तमन्ना, there are two things. One about the feasibility, the other is the recommendations of the Kovind committee. Let me first come to the feasibility. The committee itself has reported on the basis of what Election Commission wrote to it, that they can do it, no problem. In fact, this is the best thing to happen to Election Commission if they can do election once in 5 years and play golf for the next 5 years. They will love it. And they say all that they require is 3 times the equipment, which means if we have already 20 lakh EVM, then 20 lakh VVPAT, we will require 60 lakh EVM, then 60 lakh VVPAT, because the 3 elections will be happening simultaneously. Currently, we recycle the machines, but if they're happening simultaneously, we cannot recycle them. So we need to have 3 times the machine. Now, manufacturing these 40 lakh machines each, EVM and VVPAT, this is first problem. They cannot come out of the closet by the press of a button. They are time consuming. There is no magic available there. So 2-3 years is normally the time they take, right? Then they said we also require more manpower. So manpower already is very difficult to mobilize, and 15 million people conducted the general election. And if we have to get 5 more million, that will be so much more problem. But I'm sure that and more security, all that will be, the Election Commission said they will be able to do. Only thing we have to be ready with all these extra measures. And if you want me to tell you a little thing about COVID committee recommendations.
Yes. Now, please do, sir. You've gone through the recommendations, and I think they talk about phases initially, which makes sense instead of trying to do it all at one go.
Yes, I went through the report in detail, and I wrote an article in Indian Express 15 days ago, pointing out the pluses and minuses of the report. Plus is that they have recorded everything, every negative impression and every positive impression very honestly, very truthfully. All the history, the historical document, everything is truthfully recorded. That is the plus point of the committee. But now the recommendations. Some of the recommendations are almost amusing. Now, what they say that when we talk of simultaneous election, we are talking of Lok Sabha and Vidhan Sabha only. and which means Panchayati Raj elections are excluded. To me, that is absolutely, I don't want to use the strong word because the committee was headed by our former Rashtrapati. Now, there are 4,120 MLAs and 543 MPs. Well, you are talking of 1,000 people, and you are talking of a simultaneous election. 30 lakhs, 3 million Panchayati Raj elected people you have excluded. What kind of a simultaneous election is this? Now, secondly, the committee says, okay, so we can't do it together. We'll do it in 100 days. Now, that is also not simultaneous election, because an election after 100 days is a new election, separate election, requires totally separate bandobast. So many machines, the entire machinery, polling stations, all have to be repeated after 100 days. So, in the name of simultaneous election, what are they recommending? Does it make any sense?
What is the alternative?
Let me tell you, even if election commission by magic can produce all that in 100 days, all the voters who have come after taking leave from their factories, from their offices, will not be able to come back to the village within 100 days a second time. And if you deny this voting right to millions of people, it is the constitutional right which you will be encroaching on. What in the name of simultaneous election, about which, let me tell you, there is no sincerity. If simultaneous election was a sincere thing, the elections which were already being held simultaneously, like Himachal and Gujarat, why were they separated by 25 days?
No, but one minute. Sir, what is the concern? Is the concern logistical? Or
no, both, all the concerns. Yeah. One is constitutional. The one concern is definitely constitutional, federal consideration, which has been debated. And mind you, the Prime Minister had said 10 years ago that we wanted national consensus, and we have failed to achieve a consensus. Now that when we have failed to achieve a consensus, some trump card was brought in by dragging in Mr. Former Rashtrapati Kovind, who a fine gentleman is, to head this committee. Now, what is this? In fact, it was very inappropriate to bring in a former Rashtrapati in a political committee, in a Sarkari committee. So,
your response to this, Tejas, and I want you to come in. I want you to
comment on his recommendation.
Okay, I want you to comment, Tejas, on the part of federalism. The federal.
Yeah, but Tamanna, I'm not into any debate. I don't do any debate.
Okay.
If you want to ask me one-to-one, please, I have to move on.
Okay. No, 1 minute. Mr. Qureshi, I want to understand the question. Okay, let me ask you the question. I will ask you the question. No issues. On the issue of federalism, one part is the logistical part. I understand you're saying how is it simultaneous if you do it 100 days later. The other part is that why are you including the panchayat elections, etc. I understand that. The logistics, how will, you have so many people voting together, the machinery, the EVMs, all of that. But I want to understand what is your concern when it comes to the federalism part of it, because you mentioned that as well.
Yeah, federalism concern has been examined in detail by the Kovind committee, and they have come up with a recommendation that so and so, there are 5-7 articles of the constitution which will have to be amended. Well, if they can be amended, well and good, because amendment will require the national consensus, because the states have to agree. If constitution have to be gone through, which this committee has very clearly flagged. We have to go through this. But I personally feel that the moral authority of the proposal has been totally diluted. Even one point which I missed earlier, what does this committee say? That suppose a state government is dissolved before its term, so the election will be held, but it will be held for the remainder of the term. Now, the fact that the election will be held again is not a simultaneous election. In fact, it is worse, because now you hold an election for 5 years. You spend crores of rupees for a 5-year term election. In this case, this will be for the remainder of the term, which can be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, same amount, same effort. But that is not simultaneous election. So one fails to understand what is the understanding of this committee about simultaneous election when their recommendations are violating the principle of simultaneous election.
Let me ask you then, sir, what would be your prescription? First of all, theoretically, do you think simultaneous polls is a good idea for India?
No, simultaneously, logistically is a good idea, but federally, constitutionally is a bad idea, because simultaneous election will dwarf all local elections by the personality of the top leader and Lok Sabha election. And now, if you are living in a village and if you are the nali in front of your house is stinking, are you more bothered? Will you vote on the basis of that problem or Ukraine policy? Or, therefore, national issues will subsume the local issues, which is wrong, because local issues are as important the right of a Vidhan Sabha or a Lok Sabha election.
What about the concern, and I'm wondering if in all of your experience you've seen any signs of this, what about the concern that national parties have an advantage over regional parties if they're simultaneous polls? Do you think that there's any merit to that argument, Mr. Qureshi?
Yes. Yes, this is definitely a very important concern, because obviously if there is a general election party, will surely have an advantage. Their leader is most dynamic, most charismatic. So while voting for your panchayat and for your nali and anganwadi, you will not have the face of your sarpanch in your eyes. You will have the face of the biggest leader. To that extent, the local interest will get subjugated by the national interest and the national concern.
Right. So a lot of points over there by the former CEC. Thank you so much, Mr. Qureshi, for speaking with us. Since you do not want to, get into a debate, we'll leave it there. But that was S.Y. Qureshi raising some very clear concerns with the plan as it stands. Now, Tejas and Sajjan are with us, and both of you have been talking about why this is a great idea. It's the need of the hour. Now, you've heard the former CEC. Tejas, I'll come to you first, and you've heard some of the concerns that he's put out, and let's come to those points. First of all, the logistics. This is someone who's run elections, and he says that logistically, this is going to be very, very tough. What do you say about that?
Well, we also knew that Jan Dhan was tough, opening an account for everybody. We also knew that giving a gas cylinder to everybody in the country was difficult. Having electricity was difficult. It was done. I mean, let's not, if we have to get more, we have got 5 more years to go. If we have to get more, voting machines, so be it. We'll get them. We'll have to get more staff at one point of time. We will get them. I think what we are missing here is the wood for the trees, and that's the larger picture. And that is that we need election reforms. That is the larger picture here. I don't think when you talk about simultaneous polls, it means that every single election in this country has to be at the same time, in the same period. Otherwise, this
It literally does. That is the idea.
No, you have got to understand it's within a period of 100 days. The larger idea is
phase one.
not
That's
to
initially,
policy,
that's an initial proposal,
government.
isn't it? That's an initial proposal.
I think the proposal is that we're going to have the panchayat and the rest of the elections at the same time.
But to start with, that's the idea to start with. That you start in 2 phases.
Ideally, if you can do that, or the entire country.
I have O.P. Rawat with me, former election commissioner joining us, former CEC joining us. Mr. Rawat, thank you so much for speaking with us on NDTV Profit as we're breaking down this very historical decision by the cabinet. Let me start with the basics first. Do you think that simultaneous polls, one nation, one election, is something that India needs? Is it a good idea for us?
Actually, this has been in the discussion for last almost 10 years now. First election commission recommended in 2015 that yes, it will be possible if some time is given after making necessary amendments to the Constitution and the RPA Act for logistics and other things. So it is possible, and right now cabinet decision is about approving the Kovind committee report. So things will follow.
Your view, sir. Are you of the view that this is something which is good for the Indian voter amidst all of the concerns whether the requirements of a regional sort of voter or local issues which will get drowned out by central issues?
Election Commission has been in favor of simultaneous election, and in fact they were the first to propose in early 1980s, that after 1967, the parliament and state legislature elections have gone out of sync, and it has caused a lot of electioneering continuously. So Election Commission themselves recommended in 80s that some amendment should be made so that elections could be held simultaneously again. So I think what Election Commission has been thinking since then should be welcome.
What about the logistic issues? We just got off the conversation with S.Y. Qureshi, and he says that logistically, holding polls on so many levels will be very difficult, especially in terms of the EVMs required, the number of people required to manage this. Do you think that it's possible?
Actually, if you are talking of simultaneous election to parliament, the state legislature, then there is no difficulty because this has been happening continuously for 4 general elections. And not much of difference. There will be additional EVMs and VVPATs required, for which there will be enough time. I think 3 to 4 years will be required, and I think that time will be available. So for these 2 levels simultaneously, there is no issue. Only thing is when you club panchayat and municipal bodies elections, then the problem arises. So I think government will have to take a call. I don't know whether Kovind committee has recommended that all 4 levels will be held together, because I was also there in Kovind committee.
Yes, of course. Sir, they're saying initially phase 1 and phase 2, right? 100 days later, you have the local polls. But one assumes that eventually you'd want all polls together?
I don't think, because these 2 levels are very different, and then state election commissions are there, the constitutional provision is there for them, so it cannot be done away with like that.
Okay. No, so fair enough. The 100-day gap you think is enough? Because that's one concern, that in 100 days if you hold polls again, do the voters actually come back?
Local elections are, very contentious, and people are very, very much involved in those elections. So if after the state legislature and parliament, these elections are held even after 50 days, they will come back, because for them, those elections are more important than legislature and parliament.
Okay, that's a former CEC, O.P. Rawat, saying, and he was part of the Kovind committee report. In fact, thank you so much, Mr. Rawat, for speaking with us, saying that it's doable. The 2 phases are important. It's important to separate the center and state elections at one end and the local body, that means your municipal elections, your panchayat elections at the other end. Different issues. The local elections are very contentious, and it's fine if you do it 100 days later. Just last comments from Tejas and Sajjan before we close this conversation. We've heard 2 CECs, 2 views on this. Sajjan, let me come to you. Is the biggest challenge now going to be actually getting political consensus on this?
Yeah, certainly that's going to be there, because political parties will respond according to their own alliance and their own current position. So any party which is hegemonic, would like to go for the concurrent election, thinking that it's going to favor them, and opposition parties may oppose it. But nevertheless, let me take one thing which S.Y. Qureshi said. I mean, see, this very tendency to infantilize the voters. Okay, you have a great deal of experience, you have run the entire election machinery, etc. for years. But nevertheless, mind it saying that when simultaneous election happen, the issue of drainage will be clouded by the national charisma. That doesn't take into the empirical evidence. Congress lost election in Kerala way back in 1957 when Nehru was at its peak. 57 was the most popular election for Nehru. Dravidian parties came to power in 67 right under the nose of Indira Gandhi. So what the point is that why can't the issues, it may be the fact that the state-centric issues may start affecting the national issues also. So that is why the criticism are not very strong.
We'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see. I've completely run out of time. Tejas, just last word, but very quickly, please. Do you think this is doable? Or is this
doable?
Yeah.
And I think this time the BJP has done a better job of it by having a committee and at least, having talking to all parties, and the way they went about the farm bills, and which, has now completely disappeared. But I think one important question you raise is on the performance of our MLAs and MPs. Do 5 years make them really, feel they're not going to do anything at that point of time?
Maybe you want a quicker danda on the head. Yeah, maybe just that. Maybe the local polls 100 days later become that sort of yardstick to hear the voice of the people. All right, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much, Sajjan. Thank you so much, Tejas, and to all of our viewers who've joined us in this special show where we break down this big decision by the cabinet to give the nod to the context or the idea of one nation, one poll.